I will be just running through some housekeeping slides as per usual about the Green Communities program. I should also say that this webinar is recorded and will be available on our website in the coming weeks. So for those who are not aware, this webinar is out of the Green Communities Division. Green Communities is the energy hub for all Massachusetts cities and towns, not just designated green communities. So we work to provide resources for municipalities across the state on energy efficiency and renewable matters for all municipal needs. There are 4 Green Communities regional coordinators. You can see them listed out below. They act as direct liaisons with cities and towns on all renewable energy and energy efficient activities. And you can find them at the 4 regional Department of Environmental Protection offices. Should you have any questions about Green Communities, please, by all means, reach out to the coordinator in your area. You can see their emails there. There's also quite a bit of resources that we offer through the Green Communities Division. I won't go through all of them, just point to our probably our foremost one, which is the Designation and Grant Program. And this webinar will talk about some of the resources you can use when participating in that program. A list of additional resources are there, and you can see that we have them all posted on our website. A great way to learn about these resources and just other ones that we hear about is to join up for our e-blast, and you can do that by emailing the link at the bottom of the screen. That's also how any question and answer document for this webinar will be circulated. Probably point you to a link on our website through the e-blast. I mentioned the Designation and Grant Program earlier, just sort of an overview of it. There are 5 qualification criteria in order to be designated as a green community, and a municipality must meet them in order to be designated. Once you are designated, you get an initial designation grant, and after having completed that designation grant, you're then eligible for competitive grant funding. All this funding goes towards energy efficiency projects or renewable energy projects on municipal land. To learn more about the designation process, please reach out to your regional coordinator. They'll be more than happy to talk with you about it. And we've just finished this year's designation process and hope to be announcing newly designated green communities very soon. To get a sense of how green communities split up around the state, you can see on this map all the designated green communities up to this point. This does not include any that will be designated this year. But you can see that it's quite nicely dispersed across the state, and we hope to have many more communities coming on board in the future. So with that, we will start off the webinar with a poll question. We'd love to get a sense of who is on today's webinar, and I will hand it over to Charlie Tuttle, who is our webinar technician, and makes everything run smoothly to get the poll going.
So as you can see, there's a screen up there. So all you need to do is click on who's listening today, what your affiliation is. If you're a municipal procurement officer, municipal energy manager, energy services contractor, or something else. Okay, with most of the voting in, we've got about 14% out municipals, about 30% are municipal energy managers, 14% are procurement officers, and 57% are other. So that's an interesting mix.
Okay, thank you, Charlie. Well, hopefully, I think there's anyone on the webinar stands a lot to learn about the energy services procurement process. So with that, I'll talk a little bit about our presenters today. Oh, 1, 2, 5. So we have 3 presenters, as I mentioned. We've got Eileen McHugh, who'll speak first. She works here at the Department of Energy Resources as a Senior Program Coordinator for Support and Program Assistance for Performance Contracting. We'll then hear from Drew Cahill. He's the Assistant Attorney General in the Attorney General's Fair Labor Division. And then we'll finally hear from Natasha Bazanos. She is Associate General Counsel, at the Office of the Inspector General, and she will focus specifically on 30B. So with that, I will hand over to Eileen.
Hi, this is Eileen McHugh. I manage the Energy Management Services program here at DOER. It is a type of energy savings performance contracting and a public procurement option used to purchase energy and water conservation measures in existing buildings or to install on-site energy generation. The graph you see here represents current activity. These are long-term contracts, for most of them for 20 years. And the green area represents the total projects, which is underreported. It shows here 392 million. But I know that there are more out there, so we're well over 400 million in total projects for municipals and school departments. The blue area represents the cumulative annual energy cost savings of 19 million that is realized by the communities that do these projects. There are two methods that is available for cities and towns, the RFP method or the RFQ method. The RFP method includes a price component that's part of the evaluation process, and the RFQ process does not include a price component, has subsequent price discovery after you've selected the ESCO. Those prices are discovered through an investment-grade energy audit as part of the RFQ process. DOER provides procurement guidance in several ways. We have a dedicated EMS webpage that has guidelines, instructions, frequently asked questions. We have developed model documents to help ensure compliance with the regulations and to assist communities in doing this in a smooth way. We have links to other resources such as the DCAM contractor certificate, the central register. There are also some presentations there. This is a table directly from the web page that provides a summary of the key requirements needed in order to file documents with DOER. There is a form for the RFQ or the RFP that provides a checklist for ensuring that you have included everything. And we are going, based on feedback from awarding authorities, we will be changing those forms to make it easier for municipalities to provide everything. Before you publish the RFP or the RFQ in the central register, you must file it with DOER at least 15 days prior to that intended date. DOER will review that, hopefully within the 15 days, or we will notify you that we need further review. And you should not publish the bid until you receive DOER's acknowledgement. There are no specific advertising requirements, excepting that you must advertise in the central register. Of course, the more contractors you make your bid available to, the better response you will get, and the longer that you leave it out, again, you'll get a better response. Contractors must be DCAM certified under the prime contractors list under the category of energy management. There are no filed subbid or bid deposit requirements. However, you must have payment bonds and a performance bond for 100% of the project cost. Prevailing wage applies, but please confirm the prevailing wage with the Department of Labor Standards, and contractor evaluation is required. I mentioned the investment grade audit before. Under the RFQ, you must do an investment grade audit that provides the design and engineering and a list of the measures and the cost and savings from those measures. It's not required under an RFP, but there is nothing to prohibit an awarding authority from doing an IGA under an RFP. We also, in the same table, have guidelines for filing proposed contracts. Before executing the contract, you want to file that at least 15 days prior to signing. The final version of the proposed contract, there is also a form for certification that will help you go through that checklist so you make sure you have everything. We review it once again just for compliance with the regulations, and we will notify you that it complies, and if it doesn't comply, we will detail the deficiencies in your proposed contract. As I said before, these are very long-term contracts. They have a maximum term of 20 years. Two features that distinguish these contracts from other type of construction contracts is the requirement for measurement and verification of the annual energy cost savings that you realize from the energy efficiency or water efficiency equipment, and the guarantee of the energy and water savings. It's a guarantee of performance, hence the name performance contract. And now I will turn it over to Drew.
Hi, how you doing? Drew Cahill. I'm an Assistant Attorney General in the Massachusetts Attorney General's Fair Labor Division. Thank you, Eileen. Really grateful for the opportunity to be here to talk about the important issue of prevailing wage in the Commonwealth. I will go through some basics and talk about what types of violations that we see in the Attorney General's office relative to prevailing wage, along with what an Attorney General's investigation looks like in this area and potential enforcement outcomes. I will say that we appreciate the opportunity to be here because enforcement isn't always the answer. We also look for compliance up front, and this type of outreach and information sharing with procurement officers and other folks in the field is really useful in this process. So.
Before we get going with Drew, I think we just want to get a sense of who has experience with prevailing wage products in the past. We'll look to Charlie to launch our second poll question.
Okay, so have you been part of a prevailing wage project in the past? It's very simple, yes, no, or you're not sure. Okay, we've got 50% or so that said yes, about another 40% said no, and 13% or so are not quite sure.
Thank you. All right, so what is prevailing wage? Where I start with this, basically prevailing wage, as it says on the slide, prevailing wage is a special minimum wage set for public construction projects in the Commonwealth by the Department of Labor Standards for work that is actually performed on the project by employees. So the Department of Labor Standards sets the prevailing wage. Just to be clear, Eileen mentioned this, and then the Attorney General enforces the prevailing wage. There'll be, I have a slide later on with the Department of Labor Standards website as well, along with the phone number that I think has already been listed. Wage determinations are made by the Department of Labor Standards. So the Department of Labor Standards determines whether a project is subject to prevailing wage. They also determine what is the appropriate hourly wage for each classification and what the work within each classification should be. So to give some example of that, TLS will say, for instance, that plugging in a solar panel is electrician's work. The Attorney General does not make that determination. That determination is made by DLS prior to a project occurring, and the rate for that work is set at the electrician's rate in the prevailing wage rate sheet that is issued by the Department of Labor Standards. So there'll be a rate sheet issued by the Department of Labor Standards. The rate will only apply to the work performed on that project. So if the company obviously has workers, performing private construction work, just because they happen to also be performing work on a public construction project, they're only due the rate for the time they spend on the public construction project. This is a very important point I'm about to make, that the rate changes for each project. So every project, every public construction project in the Commonwealth gets its own separate prevailing wage rate sheet issued by the Department of Labor Standards. So, for instance, in the city of Newton, if they perform installation of solar panels on the roofs of their schools, they get a rate sheet for that work on that project. Electrician's work is set at a given rate on that project. If the same work is being done in a different region of the state, on a different school, by a different city or town, the electrician's rate in that second city or town and that other part of the state may be different than the one in Newton. It depends. So every project needs to get its own rate sheet, and there is not one blanket rate for various types of work around the Commonwealth. It's done by project. I've also just noted the issue of apprenticeship. I'll mention briefly that if a contractor is listing apprentices on their certified payroll records, they must have a registered apprentice program with the Department of Labor Standards Division of, I think it's a Division of Apprenticeship Services. But it's important to just ask the question if you're a part of project management or overseeing a project where you see apprentices listed. It's as simple as just asking the question, do you have a registered apprentice program with the state? If you're not comfortable with the answer, you can call the Attorney General's office and we'll ask the same question. If the apprentice program is not registered, then those workers are due the full journey person's rate for the time worked on the project. Apprentices, if they are working in ratio in a legitimate apprentice program, can be paid half of what a full journey person would be. So it's important that we have legitimate apprentices who are actually being trained and learning as part of a program on the project. It's not a label that can be used just to cut the rate in half. All right, so a couple of other points when it comes to prevailing wage requirements, posting requirements, and records. So the contractor has to post the prevailing wage rate, and it says a conspicuous location on the job site. So at least in the shop, at least in the on-site shop, if not on the outside of the shop, hopefully. If you're in a project manager or a clerk of the works or just in oversight capacity at a public construction project and you do not see a prevailing wage rate sheet posted, it may be a red flag that workers are not receiving the prevailing wage. It's a requirement of the law, and part of the reason that it's required is so workers know what they're supposed to be paid. So we run into workers on cases all the time who are shocked when we tell them what the prevailing wage actually is for the work they're doing on a project. So like I said, it's a red flag if you don't see it can be a red flag if you don't see a rate sheet posted. So then the submission of certified payroll records is also of the utmost importance on a project. If a company is failing, they're required to submit certified payroll records to an awarding authority on a weekly basis on a project that shows the hours worked, the names of the workers, the classification of the work they were doing, and how much they're being paid, along with their addresses. So when a company isn't doing that, they're in violation of the law. But more importantly, it's also a red flag, or just as importantly, it's also a red flag that they may not be paying the prevailing wage rate because the idea that a company would write down that they're paying the rate and submit it to an awarding authority, essentially making a false statement to support a claim for payment from the Commonwealth, could lead to a false claim accusation by the Attorney General. So you see some companies sometimes play it safer and just don't submit anything. They don't tell the Commonwealth anything about what they're paying people. So anyway, if you don't see certified payroll records, please ask for them. And if you don't like the answer you're getting, please call our office. The types of violations that we see, I'll just give you a couple of examples. So I mentioned that we do see a failure to pay the prevailing wage on projects. This can just be a straight-up fabrication, like I said, where the rate sheet and the certified payroll records look like the workers are being paid as required by law, but in fact they're receiving, let's say, $20 in cash under the table, so the rate is not being paid, and the company can actually not provide payroll records to support the idea that they're paying the rate as they state on their CPRs. But we see different variations of schemes and where companies are not paying the prevailing wage. Either a scenario where they call everyone a laborer, for example, even though they're doing electrician's work or sheet metal work or roofer's work. They'll find a lower classification that pays less money. Laborer is often the classification they'll go to, and you'll see one of these projects where there's all kinds of complicated, nuanced, technical work being done, but the certified payroll records indicate that only laborers are performing this work. In that case, it's very likely that a piece of the workforce is being misclassified. As I mentioned the records violations. They're required to submit certified payroll records, and they're required to submit them to the Attorney General upon request, not just to the awarding authority every week. They're also required to make those records true and accurate in real time. So even if it's done unintentionally, we have cases where a company, just can't keep track of the hours that workers are working. It's may not be because they're trying to undercut the prevailing wage. It may just be because they're poor record keeping. But it raises a lot of questions when that happens, and that's a violation of the law to fail to keep true and accurate, maintain true and accurate certified payroll records, and to fail to submit true and accurate when requested by the AG's office. So we do see those scenarios. I'll talk about investigations briefly. So when we see a scenario where a company may not be paying the prevailing wage, we get these investigations from a variety of sources. We'll get sometimes just straight up employee complaints from the field. Workers figure out that they're on a public project and that the PW applies, or a different contractor may tell them, workers from a different subcontractor may tell them, are you getting the rate? What do you mean the rate? What's the rate? And then they hear about it, they call us. We also get referrals from community-based organizations that have contact directly with workers, with unions, and then we also get referrals from competitive companies who know that they're being undercut on bids by companies that choose to evade the prevailing wage. Lastly, we get referrals from awarding authorities and project managers who notice discrepancies. So we do site visits unannounced. We have the authority under statute to be on site and to ask for records and talk with workers. You don't need additional authority to do that. You can do it anytime, any place. An investigation itself can involve a number of different pieces of process. I have listed here records, demands, audits, and interviews. So we'll talk to everybody. We'll want to talk to the clerk of the works. We'll talk to the general contractor, other subs, workers. We'll audit whatever records we can get our hands on. We will demand the records from the contractor and any other contractors. We have the authority to demand records, as I mentioned earlier, and the law requires employers to provide us those records, including employees' names, addresses, job classifications, rate of pay, hours worked, each day, each week. So when we move down the road of enforcement, if an investigation materializes, I should just make the point that under the state prevailing wage law, the violations that we may see don't have to be intentional, so we have the option of bringing unintentional civil citations, which come with a fine of up to $7,500 per unintentional violation, which can be broken down by worker, by pay period. So the fines can add up very quickly, even in an unintentional scenario. Where we see indicia of intent, those fines can go up to $15,000 per worker per pay period. So we do a lot to look at the issue of intent versus unintentional. We can issue the civil citations, which essentially order the company to pay the workers the restitution that we determine they're owed, along with the penalty as determined by our office according to the statute. But we also enter into plenty of settlements with companies. Once we describe our findings, if we're given the opportunity to describe our findings to an employer, for an opportunity to come to an agreement with our office where they'll pay restitution and a penalty. Sometimes they ask. We're certainly not looking to make everything into a adversarial scenario. If we can get compliance and restitution up front, we look for those opportunities depending on the case. I have criminal prosecution listed here. This is the less often used part of the statute, but we have the option, and we do take the option to pursue criminal enforcement. The violations I've mentioned, non-payment of prevailing wage and records violations, are both civil and criminal violations, and it's the office's discretion where to pursue criminal enforcement. We also have debarment listed here. So for a company that's been received a civil citation 3 times in 2 years or 3 separate violations civilly, it's automatic 1-year debarment. Conviction, criminal conviction of any of these violations I mentioned, PW violations, is an automatic 5-year debarment. So debarment is in play in these cases. I just list here, and I'm not going to go through piece by piece, but we look at a number of different things when we talk about intentional versus unintentional, criminal versus civil, what to do about violations in a case. Obviously, is there a scheme in play? Are they a frequent flyer? Have we seen them before? Or other types of violations or serious fraud occurring? Now, the civil citation process, just for background, like I said, we order through a civil citation. We have the authority to order restitution and penalties. They do have a right to appeal in an administrative setting those civil citations. If a company fails to pay a citation or fails to follow through with the order of the magistrate after an appeal, that's an automatic one-year debarment as well. So you can't just ignore a citation for failure to pay prevailing wage or failure to submit true and accurate payroll records without getting a one-year debarment. I do have a slide just to give a little bit more background on criminal prosecutions. So there are a couple of different ways that can happen. The district court setting is a scenario where we would take the failure to pay prevailing wage and the records violations and go into district court and request that criminal complaints be issued. We would usually have to do that through a show cause hearing with the magistrate to at least show that we have probable cause to bring the criminal complaints. In other cases, we do use grand jury in Superior Court. When we do this, it's both investigatory and accusatory, the grand jury. So the grand jury has the ability to send out subpoenas and ask for records and subpoena witnesses to come and testify as part of a grand jury investigation. When that happens, that will often include municipalities, clerks of the works. The grand jury will want to see the file, what has happened on a project, progress report, request for payments, work records, things of that nature. And it is always really helpful when a municipality or a project manager can respond fully to a grand jury subpoena in one of those investigations. Those cases often involve other types of criminal activity. The list that you saw earlier, workers' comp fraud, unemployment fraud, things like that. So with workers' comp fraud, for instance, we do have companies that tell their workers' comp carrier, even though they're doing iron work or laborers work, sheet metal work on public construction projects, they say, they tell their workers' comp carrier that they only have administrative assistance on their policy. So that would be premium evasion and workers' comp fraud. Or they tell the unemployment department that they only have 4 workers, even though the certified payroll records from the project show 30 workers. That would be unemployment fraud. So those cases do come up, and we handle those cases as part of these wage and hour investigations. With that, I have just a couple of slides with contact information for our office and with the Department of Labor Standards. If you see something, say something. Give us a call, and just know that these requirements exist. We appreciate any help when it comes to compliance. Thank you. I will pass it on to Natasha Designation from the Office of the Inspector General.
Thank you, Drew. Good afternoon. This is Natasha Designation from the Office of the Inspector General. As Drew said, I will be presenting an overview of MGL Chapter 30B with regard to MGL Chapter 25A, Energy Management Procurement.
Just before Natasha jumps in, we want to get a sense of if you are familiar with this kind of procurement. So one last poll question for you.
So have you done a 30B procurement before? Please select one. Yes, no, we're not sure. Okay, well, it's quick. With about 80%, 40% said yes, and 40% said no-ish. That number is kind of modulating a little bit, but we're kind of in the neighborhood.
So half.
About half and half.
Okay, good. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about Chapter 30B applicability. Okay, great. So Chapter 30B applies to the procurement of supplies and services as well as the disposal of surplus supplies. It also can apply to real property. It applies to acquisitions and dispositions of real property and interest in real property by a governmental body. By the way, the Office of the Inspector General does have an extensive 30B program to assist local governments. If anybody out there has a question after the program that's very specific and fact-based to their situation, they can always call the 30B hotline. We're available for questions daily from 8:30 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. at 617-722-8838. When you do call the hotline, we ask that you leave a brief description of your issue on the voicemail, and we'll do, if necessary, a little research to get the appropriate answer to you when we call you back. Okay, so Chapter 30B, what is governmental bodies? It applies to governmental bodies, and what do governmental bodies? Governmental bodies that are applicable to 30B are cities, towns, regional school districts, the Horace Mann charter schools, which we sort of refer to informally as the local charter schools, counties, agencies, boards, commissions, authorities, departments, and instrumentalities of all of the above. It does not apply to state agencies. So executive agencies of the Commonwealth do not follow 30B. It doesn't formally apply to state colleges and universities, although I might say some state colleges and universities have adopted 30B as their program to follow for procurement. But it's not mandated for state colleges and universities. It also does not apply to county sheriff's offices or the Commonwealth charter schools, also known as state charter schools. Okay. So those responsible for procuring energy management system contracts need to know that other laws that might be applicable to these projects and to assess their options. For example, Chapter 30B might apply to the procurement of a consultant or an owner's agent to help with the implementation of the project. Also, just keep in mind and note that in OSC, the statewide contract might also be an option to procure energy consulting services. And keep in mind as well that municipal finance laws might impact EMS project funding. All right, I'm going to go over the various procurement thresholds under Chapter 30B. So on this flow chart, if you want to follow, I'm going to read it from left to right. For procurements under $10,000, sound business practices is the method for procurement. So that's kind of the basic due diligence you do as regular consumers. Internet research, reviewing flyers and brochures for prices, sort of kind of the everyday methods we use when we're trying to shop and do price comparisons. Then when you get into the higher threshold amounts, so $10,000 to $34,999.99, right? Almost to $35,000. In that bracket, you're going to solicit 3 price quotations. They can be written or oral, so you could literally email your purchase description out to 3 vendors. You can call if you'd like. It's always a good idea to have your purchase description written down so you apply basically the exact same description to everybody you contact. The price quotations can come back written or oral. However, keep in mind that even if somebody doesn't respond to you, so you contact 3 and let's say only 2 vendors get back to you, that's still sufficient as long as you can show that you solicited your 3 price quotations, you attempted to solicit 3 price quotations. So not getting the 3rd would not cancel the process in any way. And then when you get to the greater procurement threshold of $35,000 or more, it would need to be a competitive sealed bid or proposal. So basically, either an invitation for bid or a request for proposal process. On the next slide, we have a few of the benefits of attending the MCPPO classes. So our office does offer procurement classes in a variety of areas. We administer basically what's called the abbreviation stands for the Massachusetts Certified Public Purchasing Official Program. It's meant to promote cost-effective, ethical, and modern purchasing practices, and to also allow for a dialogue and exchange of ideas and best practices among procurement officials. There's a lot of networking that gets done in class, people bouncing ideas off each other on various types of procurements and getting best practice ideas, etc. It also increases the stewardship of resources in the public interest, and it helps also to ensure compliance with mass contracting laws. A few of the classes that we have that may basically pertain to energy management systems. Public contracting overview is the most basic of the procurement classes. Then there's supplies and services contracting, design and construction contracting as well, and advanced topics update. And we have a whole slew of courses you can take that are available on our website at mass.gov/IG. And there you have a picture of, once you take these 3 basic classes, the top 3 here, you actually become certified as an MCPPO, and that's what your certificate would look like. In the corner there, that image. And for details on getting certified as an MCPPO, you can contact Joyce Emmett, I believe, for her contact info. It's coming up on the last page. So on these various seminars, we incorporate presenters from all over the state. The Attorney General's office, I think Drew's presented for us before, Eileen's presented for us before from GOER, Department of Labor Standards. We have folks from the Ethics Commission come in, Office on Disability also presents, Operational Services Department, the Secretary of State, and the Supply Diversity Office as well as our local government officials. So we basically get the perspective of really a slew of different public officials, and it's a really good background for all sorts of procurement practices. On this last slide coming up, if you are interested in registering for a class or finding out more about the classes, you can always call me directly, Natasha Pisanos. I'll give you my number, 617, I don't think it's on this slide, 617-722-8896, and I can answer any questions you might have about any of the courses. Also, the director of the program for certification questions would be Joyce McEntee Emmett, 617-722-8835. And then to register, Judy Simaldoro, one of our program coordinators, 722-8862. And I won't read you this part, but if you do want to fax your registration, the fax and email information is on this last slide. But in terms of a substantive question, the 30B hotline is always available, and please, we look forward to hearing from you on any energy questions you might get or have, to you that very day with an answer. So it is an excellent resource if you're having any questions or issues. And I believe that is it for me.
Thank you. Here is my contact information, email address, the address for the Energy Management Services page, and to the special email address to file documents. And now we would like to take some questions from the participants.
So folks, it looks like we've got some very talented presenters because there's no questions at this time. But should some come up, by all means, I think you've gotten quite a bit of great contact info today. Oh, I spoke too soon. We have a couple of questions. So there's a question about 30B price thresholds. So I think this goes this way. My understanding was that 30B price thresholds were $5,000 and $25,000, not $10,000 and $35,000.
Okay. So I can go forward and answer, right? So those thresholds recently, in the past couple of years, have changed. As of July 1st, 2014, we're officially at these thresholds that were on the flow chart slide. A couple of the thresholds, there's been a couple revisions. Some changes were July 2013, then they were revised again in July 2014. So it increased, the lowest threshold increased for sound business practices from $5,000 to $10,000 now. So when it doubled, you can do sound business practices, basic due diligence is another way of describing that, for $10,000 or under $10,000. The next threshold also went up. It used to be, you were right, $25,000 was the tip of that threshold. It's now $10,000 to $35,000, or to be more accurate, $34,999.99. And the highest threshold was also increased. $35,000 or greater brings you to the competitive proposal process, which would be an invitation for bid or request for proposal. So they were what you mentioned, and they did increase in the recent past. I hope that answers your question.
Great. Thank you very much. Are there any others out there? Okay. Well, we're not seeing any others pop up, but we will take, we'll keep some of the questions we'll have a record of, and we will post all answers to questions on our website. We'll also email out via our e-blast function to ensure that folks have access to those. This webinar, for your reference, will also be posted on the Green Communities website in the coming days, both the recording and the handouts and slides. So you can refer back to it. I think quite a bit of helpful information, and thank you to our three presenters for all their work. See you next time.